It's kind of interesting. I can really relate to that deeply. So much of my life, like what you mentioned, Matt, is I really felt like stuck in this box of, I don't know if you want to call it perfectionism or really just having kind of like the shield up that says, here's what I need to present to the world in order to be loved. And I know where that came from. It really came from my growing up years where I didn't believe that I was okay just as I was, and that I needed to please my mom, say, in a certain way, like say the right things or do the right things or get the grades or whatever it might be. And I didn't feel like I had permission to really be open, vulnerable about who I was, what my needs were. And so I really kind of grew up with a sense of I don't really get to share what my needs are. I don't really get to have a say. I just need to show up in a way that helps keep me safe, because I think that's what my little brain translated over to me was, here's what's going to keep me as a part of this and not kick me out of the tribe, if you will, of my family, or outside of her love or my parents' love, or out of the house or whatever it might be.
As sons of God, men have so much capacity for good, joy, and happiness, but far too often they're depressed, disconnected, and unfulfilled. Man Talk for Latter-day Saints is dedicated to creating conversations with Latter-day Saint men about the things that are critical to men becoming their best selves, including spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being. Men need other men to help them become healthy, grounded, confident men. And our intent is to help Latter-day Saint men become the men God has created us to be. Hi, and welcome to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. I'm Matt Allred. I'm on the board of One Heart, One Light, a nonprofit organization that teaches skills to help people with a Latter-day Saint background process their emotions in healthy ways, rewrite limiting beliefs, and access the power of Christ's atonement in real time.
Hey everybody, this is Bob Smith, and I'm on a mission to create strong, connected, and happy families and societies in our world. And it is my belief that that begins with powerful, loving, purpose-driven husbands, fathers, and men. So as such, I have a program called Be Powerful, and I'm a coach that helps LDS men turn stress, anxiety, and doubt into total empowerment in any area of their life.
And I'm Dan, grateful to be here. I'm a master coach, a teacher, and the owner of Unlimited Soul Coaching. I teach people how to use their agency to connect more intentionally to their identity and create a life they love.
So today we are talking about identity, and specifically, the question comes to mind, can you identify with your identity? And I want to start with a quote from Carl Jung that illuminates this question for me. He says, "There appears to be a conscience in mankind which severely punishes the man who does not somehow and at some time, at whatever cost to his pride, cease to defend and assert himself, and instead confess himself fallible and human." And this highlights so much for me because I spent the first 43 or so years of my life trying to look and act perfect. And yet I was unconsciously trying to manage my sense of self and keep from really being known. I've come to see this as living from a sense of a false self or false identity, which I define as acting in ways that I think others want me to act instead of being true to who I am. So Bob and Dan, what are your thoughts as we peel apart this onion of identity?
It's kind of interesting. I can really relate to that deeply. So much of my life, like what you mentioned, Matt, is I really felt like stuck in this box of, I don't know if you want to call it perfectionism or really just having kind of like the shield up that says, here's what I need to present to the world in order to be loved. And I know where that came from. It really came from my growing up years where I didn't believe that I was okay just as I was, and that I needed to please my mom, say, in a certain way, like say the right things or do the right things or get the grades or whatever it might be. And I didn't feel like I had permission to really be open, vulnerable about who I was, what my needs were. And so I really kind of grew up with a sense of I don't really get to share what my needs are. I don't really get to have a say. I just need to show up in a way that helps keep me safe, because I think that's what my little brain translated over to me was here's what's going to keep me as a part of this and not kick me out of the tribe, if you will, of my family, or outside of her love or my parents' love, or out of the house, or whatever it might be. But for some reason, that just seemed that translated to me as safe, which means I can't really show up for who I am. And so I'm not sure I even really knew who I was. And I really feel like I started that journey, 8, 9, maybe 10 years ago, into figuring out who I really am, and trying to figure out what I really want. And that journey continues for me.
Beautiful. Thank you.
As I say, as I just listened to both your comments, I noticed that just from a paradigm about identity, how valuable it is. I think it's been valuable for me to notice that journey that you talked about from your experiences, Bob, and you from your Matt, and I have my version of that, is that it feels like I want to say that's not the problem, though. That's really been the path, because I think in order to I don't know if it's tap into, or if it's discover or cultivate. Maybe there's a lot of words that could be used to talk about the journey of stepping into our identity and understanding it. But it seems like it's and maybe this builds on some of our discussions from last week, but it's kind of destiny to feel exactly what we all just described to some extent, to feel this disconnect between who we are and who people want us to be or expect us to be. And I make up that in that friction and in that gap, that's valuable in the process of finding out our identity. We almost need some of that friction in order to discover.
Oh, I totally agree. And I think that the beauty and kind of what I hope we can kind of distill out of this is the anxiety that I felt of trying to, kind of like Bob was talking about, just trying to own who I am versus how I think I need to show up. To me, I think, to your point, Dan, I think it's universal. I think it's part of the fall. I think it's part of shame entering in the world, and oh, I'm not good enough. I need to hide. I need to bury myself somewhere else because God doesn't want to see me and others don't want to see me. And if they know who I really am, and I think that's the message of shame, is if they really know who I am, I'm dead. They're gonna reject me. I'm game over. So back to that anxiety of helping my sons, for example, realize that, hey, it's okay, that you're not alone in this, that you don't have to walk this journey, well into your 40s before you realize that you're okay. Hey, I love you no matter what, where you are on this. It's more of you coming to grips with who you are, being able to love and accept yourself. And that for me was gold, but it took half my life to just learn that I'm acceptable, that I can accept who I am. And I love the way you said that, Dan. It is the path. It is the journey. And I guess the question I'm having is, how can we better support one another as men on this journey, so we're not all sitting on our island panicking that everybody else on their little island is going to reject us for who we are.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to add to all that is I actually still do see it as a problem. So is it the path? It is a path to take, but I still see it as a problem if we don't do what Carl Jung has said, how you so beautifully said in the beginning, is to use it to teach ourselves, right? Because I guess if I'm looking for my mom to give me validation and to tell me that I'm okay, instead of me knowing that I can go inside of myself and sort through what's there and come up with the answer that I really am okay, that I am truly a child of God, that I have infinite value and worth that cannot be taken away, diminished by anything I do or say or what anyone else does or says around me either. It's a complete, it comes with us. And I can get those answers, but when it's our young brain that almost doesn't have another option other than to look to our parents for saying, I need someone else to tell me that I'm okay, or that I'm good enough, or that, everything around me is okay and that I'm safe. That's kind of a tough answer, right? Because it's such a normal thing for us to want to have. But then when you take that into, say, a marriage relationship like I did, then instead of looking to my mom to say you're okay, now all of a sudden I've transferred that responsibility over to my spouse to say, okay, I'm doing all these things. I'm working hard. I'm doing my callings. I'm helping out with the kids. Why are you still not happy with me? And then me harboring all of that internal resentment because she's still upset for some reason and she really shouldn't be. And if she really, saw me for who I was, then she wouldn't be upset and she'd be okay with me. When what I didn't realize is that was her having her experience of this, but I was wanting still that validation to come from her, and inappropriately so, really, right? But I didn't realize that I didn't realize I was asking that of my spouse and kind of expecting that of her, but I really was. And it's a weight that I was asking her to carry that was never hers to carry. And so it was on me to try to take that and to sort through it and figure it out. But it took me a really long time in that marriage relationship to start making some of those connections and then starting to go deep into myself. And I resisted, the counseling, I resisted other help. I thought if I have the prophets and we've got scriptures and I've got the priesthood and we've got church leaders and we've got, like, I'm doing my calling and I should be, and I'm a pretty smart guy, I should be able to figure all this stuff out. When in reality, we have no hope of figuring this stuff out unless we get some help in helping us sort through it and figure it out with a great therapist, a great counselor, a great coach, whatever that might be, to understand the goodness of who we are. And it's really the thoughts and the beliefs that we picked up along the way that are creating the discord inside of us. Yeah. Any thoughts from you guys?
I think that's beautifully said, Bob, because it can be a problem for a long time before it becomes a path. And that time can be very painful. So I do think it's probably accurate to say, like, it doesn't have to be long, right? It doesn't have to, like you alluded to, Matt. You're trying to teach your sons early some of these truths that help them recognize these things. I often think of this somewhat as the paradigm of pain, is how I describe it with my clients. It's kind of like sometimes we choose change only because of pain, and the pain has to be all these thresholds of something, like it has to be this painful before I choose.
Sure.
To, in essence, and to me, part of this journey, Matt, when you're saying how do we support men in touching and in choosing and in finding and cultivating their true identity, to me, I say, I found this has been true for me. I say to my clients, it always starts with letting go. So that journey to, like, how much pain do you need before you let go? Before you say, like, oh wow, my pride has to go down. This is more of a something I view true identity, excuse me, more as something to be received, and something figured out, as you were alluding to. I think, to me, that was one of those core paradigm shifts personally, is that I stopped trying to figure it out and I started being open to receive who I was. And in some ways, that's kind of what you alluded to, Bob, like I'm actually beginning to validate myself because I'm receiving myself. So I guess there's a couple additional thoughts to what you've said.
Yeah, those are beautiful thoughts. I appreciate that, and I do think, to your point, the did you call it the paradigm, not parable?
Yeah, the paradigm of pain, like
Paradigm
that
of
lens of
pain.
pain is.
Sure. No, and it, to me, it certainly resonates with the gospel. We have to taste the bitter, or we can never understand the sweet. And for some of us, and maybe I'm one of those, right? I needed to taste a lot of bitter before I'm finally like, gosh, I'm so sick of eating bitter. Maybe I need to do something different. Maybe I need to exercise my agency. And honestly, I do think that there were opportunities maybe to clue in earlier, to humble myself, or like you said, Dan, to just receive, or my own identity, and be happy with myself. And yet, I resisted for a long time. I thought I think a part of me thought that, hey, I can perfect myself. I can figure this out on my own, and then I'm going to show up. Then I'm going to actually stop hiding, and I'll, come out as, oh, hey, I got this figured out and I can help all of you. And maybe that was just my pride speaking. And part of it, I think too, was just not knowing where to go. Who is safe to go to, right? Bob, you can't really go to your wife and say, hey, wife, I need you to fix me because I'm a broken man. She's like, sorry, dude, it's not my department. And so I do believe that we as men have that gift to coach, to nurture, to whether it's sons, there's something magical about men helping men. And I guess the scripture that pops into my head is, we always say this is about marriage when the Lord said it's not good for man to be alone. In the last few years, I've come to see that as that's not just about marriage. It's not ever good for man to be alone. Man, certainly you need to get married, but you also need brothers that can kick you in the butt and say, dude, what are you thinking? Right? Or whatever, hold you accountable, or at least raise your sights. So some of my thoughts.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the island last time we talked, or maybe that was, when we weren't recording, but yeah, yeah, that was a concept that came up, which I thought was really cool. One island being, I need to stay away from everybody so that they don't see my imperfections and the problems that I have, and therefore I won't be good enough and acceptable and loved, for who I am and what I am. Or there's the other island of true like replenishment. Like I'm going to be alone for a little bit because this is a time for renewal for me, a time to be with, God, a time to be with myself, a time to really prep myself in the ways that I really need to in order to show up, in the biggest way. And what's funny about all this too is we, at least this is just from my perspective, but maybe this will serve somebody out there, and I hope it will. But it's not that I didn't know how to get the help. It's almost like I didn't want to believe that I needed the help in the first place. Like my foundation itself was not working. It was kind of cracking and crumbling. If you can imagine like a foundation under a house, it was just kind of being held together. And it's almost like I just need to hold it together by adding more duct tape to it instead of like really opening up the foundation itself and seeing what's really causing the breaks and the spalling and whatever else is happening inside of that. It's almost like I didn't want to get the help or didn't think I needed the help. And if I were, it's almost like this self-perpetuating cycle of, if I were good enough, I could I should be able to fix all this myself. And so by asking for help, that means I'm not good enough. And so therefore I'm going to stay in the cycle of believing I should fix it all myself. Does that make any kind of sense?
Sure. Yeah.
And one thing I relate that to is when you talk about pain and the level of pain, if an air conditioner goes out, so I'm in Texas, Matt, you're in Georgia.
Sure.
If our air conditioner goes out in the middle of summer, like how quickly are we going to get on the horn to somebody, please come over here and fix my pain? Like how quickly and immediately do we slap down that credit card and say, I am interested in you solving my problem and getting me out of this pain because I don't want to feel, this sweltering Georgia heat or Texas heat any longer than I have to, right? And how funny is it that we wouldn't hesitate as men to call somebody to say, hey, I don't know how to fix this air conditioner, but I know someone that does know how to fix this air conditioner. And it doesn't even phase us to do that, to say, if I were good enough, I would know how to fix my own air conditioner. But because I'm not good enough as a human being or as a man or whatever, I don't know how to fix it. And therefore, I have all this internal turmoil as to whether I should call somebody or shouldn't call somebody. And I think I'm just going to sit in the sweltering heat, and my family's going to sit in the sweltering heat, believing that if I were good enough, I should know how to fix this, and therefore I'm not going to do anything about it. But similarly to us, right, is at what point did we know any of these things? What class did we take in school that says, hey, here's what your emotions mean. And just so you know, they're kind of an indicator of what's going on, in your mind and in your heart and what's going on for you. And here's how you process these emotions. Oh, and by the way, when you feel shame, this is what that feels like. And if you're feeling that way and you want to hide and you want to cover up and you want to conceal and you want to move away from everybody, here's what that looks like for you. And when this happens, here's what you go do about it to understand yourself better and to understand the world around you better. Like, what class did any of us take in school to learn how to do any of that? Or at what point did our parents sit us down and say, hey, by the way, when you have these great big emotions come up for you, here's the plan. Or when you feel this way, here's what this could mean. Like, at what point did any of us sit down? Did anyone sit us down and teach us all these things, right? And so why in the world would we believe that we even can begin to have all of the tools that we need at our disposal to fix any problem that might come up in our life, including, the process of healing our souls from the wounds that we are inevitably going to pick up?
Yeah, good question. What do you think about that, Dan?
Therein is the path, is what I think. It's just as you said, Bob, it's really, I guess it invites me to look at the eternal view, because clearly all that experience you just described, for whatever reason, when it's about us, right? It's our air conditioner, it's this direction. It's not in us, it's over here. It's easy to get help that direction. When it's this direction, you said this earlier, like it gets in the way. We want to be loved and we want to feel safe. And man, if something feels like it's going to threaten those things happening to us, we will resist into extreme pain if we haven't learned that it actually is safe, right? That there is safety and love independent of our own actions and our choices and all these different things. And so, yeah, as I sit there and think about it, I guess from my journey, I can see that all that pain, my moments of pain, my moments of introspection always led, and I'll go back to what I said, always led to me choosing now and, activating my agency and choosing to let go. To me, in order to really make that, for me, that first step was letting go of that insistent grip on, my values this direction, my values that side of me, and I have to protect it at all costs. What other people say is the truth, right? I had to begin to let go of those ideas and notice that actually I can be fine without that. And actually there's safety, actually more safety than I've ever experienced as I come towards myself and face who I am and begin to give myself love, especially in the relationship with Jesus Christ, right? Because for me, that's maybe the root of not being able to do this on my own instead of receive it. All of this pain to me leads me to Christ. And then he helps me unpack those things that you were talking about, Bob, line by line and precept upon precept. I think that's the other thing about identity that's worth considering, is that it's not a big switch that's just like slap, okay, here you go. It is like the Lord just says, line upon line and precept upon precept. So it's just micro. It's a little bit here and a little bit there. And I think that's also part of needing to let go, is that you can receive just a little bit here and a little bit there and actually receive it and not reject it or think nothing's happening in that journey. So
talk to us a little bit more, Dan, about this process of letting go. Because I remember years ago, when somebody would say, oh, I just gave it to Christ. And I'm like, what? How do you even do that? Right. And I've come to, I guess, have some of my own processes for doing that. But how would you distill that to somebody who's maybe going, what are you even talking about?
Well, I guess it's valuable to me. I take a step back, because in order for me to actually experience and choose to let go, I recognize that the first step, and I guess I was talking about this somewhat, was I first needed to trust Jesus Christ.
Okay.
In essence, I wouldn't let go if I didn't have a belief and a hope and a trust that it was okay and safe to let go. So for me, if you were to answer that question, I noticed for me that what was an incremental and vital part of my journey was choosing to build a better relationship with Christ. And that can be done. I mean, that is personal suddenly, right? I mean, there's the generic or the not maybe not generic, but the broad answers of, there's prayer and there's scripture study and there's temple attendance and there's activities like that. But there's a lot of men doing those things that don't feel like they have their identity and still feel lost in that. So for me, what that looked like was actually choosing to realize that I guess I'll give one of the examples of how I began to apply this and it felt new and meaningful, is I began to realize that just, pleading on my knees, like, oh, help, 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 was definitely a way in which I could connect to Christ. But it's almost like Christ wanted to open my eyes to see that's not the only way that we can have a relationship in which you can come to know me. What, Dan, and more or less the impressions I got were, Dan, what do you really enjoy doing? What inspires you and feels good to you? And for me, that was time outside, specifically witnessing the sunrise. I love sunrises and I love sunsets. And I began to create ritual around those moments in which, as opposed to this, help, I need your help, or fix this, or whatever it was type prayers, I just went out there and received the morning sunrise. And I really just sat there, not with some like efforting energy, but instead an open energy just to receive the sun rising over the mountains. And for me to go, that's me. I'm choosing to receive Christ right now in this moment that I really enjoy and really feels good. So that little shift in my morning practice years ago, still to this day happens in my life. And it's a fundamental part of how have been able to discover my identity, because in that space, I am essentially letting go. I cannot receive Christ and grip these old stories. So as opposed, and this is in an activity that I actually also enjoy. Like, I really love this. So that's where I think it could be different for different men, but that has been extremely beneficial to me to actually practice receiving when it feels good in an activity that I love. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I think it's very helpful. And I'm kind of pondering in my mind, because you're talking about receiving and letting go. And I think what I hear you saying is, I'm letting go of maybe my own agenda. I'm just here to receive Christ. I'm not, forcing or trying to somehow compact the sunrise, give it to me in a 30-second bite because that's all I have time for. No, I'm just here to receive, versus trying to coerce and force and like I often do.
Well, and I'll tell you that what it feels like is I literally feel like my shoulders drop and my breath expand. I sense I'm really choosing to release all those burdens that I carry a lot.
Sure.
And so I guess I would say this, I think the body can be very helpful to us in this journey of discovering who we are by listening to it, by noticing it. And you alluded to feelings a lot, Bob, because it's right. That's what we can tune into and notice, is those feelings, those emotions that are coming up for us. But in those moments, I do think that there's an opportunity to literally feel the burden lighten as we choose. And I'll say for me, like, as I choose to just, as you said, I'm not doing anything right now, but opening myself to receive. And again, that's more personal to me in my journey, but it's been profound. It's a little thing. I do it often, and it makes a tremendous difference in my life.
Beautiful. And I love the way you kind of, it's foundational that I first trust, that I trust Christ, that he's there. And then receive, obviously implies that, oh, he's actually sending me something. I don't have to, grovel my way up to the top of Mount Everest before he'll look at me and pay attention. But no, he's actually trying to give me stuff now. And I think that's part of where I was caught earlier in my journey, was feeling like I somehow had to fast longer and read more scriptures and somehow create my worthiness of his love. That's where I really got off, was feeling like I'm not, at least, it was subconscious, but at the same time, it was how I was manifesting. I had to, drive myself. I said groveling to the top of Mount Everest. It felt like that sometimes. Just, please God, please pay attention to me. And instead of just believing that he's already there, that he's already, handing me blessings, and I'm too busy focusing on myself and my perfection to just receive and just let go of trying to control the process. I think that's what I'm understanding from you about letting go is stop trying to control the process.
Well said. And this, I mean, in this little subnote, really this can apply to our relationships too, because when you stand in front of your wife, she's having a moment, and you position yourself to receive because you've practiced it over here with Christ, you don't get caught in the mess, even though it might be coming right at you like this is your fault, blah, blah, blah. It's like, in essence, I notice like, oh, I can receive this. I can receive this moment. I can stay here and not internalize this, not take it on, not like, oh my gosh, or defend myself. You're wrong, and I've got to tell you I'm right. Like instead, you can stand there and receive a moment. And so I notice how that practice has helped. It translates over into other moments in which, in essence, normally I would resist, and now instead I position myself to receive. So to me, that's a key part of our identity, learning to receive.
Yeah. And that's what I'm seeing is the way I see it tying back to identity is, hi, honey, I see that you're having a challenge. It's not about me. Even if she thinks it is about me, it's not about my core identity, right?
Yeah.
And I'm willing to validate and offer love and support and even change the way I handled that so clumsily. But I don't need to defend and fight and convince you that you're wrong, to just be present with you in your difficult. Beautiful.
Totally.
Beautiful.
Yeah, let me throw this into the ring too with all of this is maybe just to bring it back to like real life, how this shows up, where we would see it. Like how do we know if we are not in the receptive mode and when we're in like a different mode? And here's just what I've noticed with myself, with the men that I coach. It seems like there's three main things that come up consistently, and you guys can chime in and let me know if you see more, but this seems to be a pretty consistent theme from what I've seen is we go into protective mode, meaning we're defensive, like don't come near me, or we even shy away, like pull away from, connection, interaction, whether it be with other men, with our wife, with our kids, whatever it might be. So one is protective mode. If we notice ourselves going to that place. Another one is procrastinate, like that we're not showing up, we're not moving forward on what we really know that we should be, because it might expose us to who we really are. That means that whatever is at the end of this task or thing that we believe that we should do right now and that we feel compelled to do and that we maybe even feel inspired to do, we believe that if it doesn't turn out a certain way, that we're going to have to believe less about ourselves and about our identity itself. And then the third way that I've seen this show up is in performance, meaning like we get into the busy to like overcome some perceived lack or deficiency within us. So, which means like, again, my foundation inside is cracking and crumbling or whatever, and I'm taking like duct tape around it. And I just think, man, the more I could just duct tape this thing, and I'm just going to duct tape it to death, when really it's the internal parts of, or the composition maybe of the cement itself that is not working. And no matter how much duct tape I try to put around it, and no matter how hard I work and how many rolls I get out and how many times trips to Lowe's I make in order to go get more duct tape to come back and secure this foundation, it's still just going to wither away underneath. But I just feel like the performing is going to overcome this deficiency or this perceived deficiency that I see within myself. Yeah, so protective, procrastinate, and performing. It seems like those seem to be kind of some big ways in which this shows up, and it certainly has shown up for me. When I know that I'm not in that mode of openness, of receiving, of trust, of I can handle however this goes, either way this goes, and I can just be in that place and not be moved, by what's happening around me. Yeah, any thoughts, you guys?
I mean, I love what those three, I would even call them, defensive tactics to what comes to mind is that I'm protecting my ego, right? I'm not interested in being real or accepting my true identity or standing firm in who I am, as much as protecting what's false about me. Like when that little thing I said at the beginning about, the way I act because that's how I think others want me to act. I've been caught in that so many times of just, hey, this is how I'm going to show up because that's how I think they want me to show up. Only realize that's just garbage. It's nonsense. It's not who I am, and I'm certainly not living from my true core if I'm just trying to be almost like an actor, right? I'm showing up to acting because I think you're gonna like who I show up as. Anyway, it's yeah, total nonsense. But
And when we boil that
the
down,
default.
it's like we don't even know what's in somebody else's mind. Like, how do we even know that that's
Oh,
what
sure.
is in their head in any sense of the word, right?
Mhm.
And nor do they know what's going on inside of our minds and hearts as to what we're making all of this mean, right? So yeah, it's just fascinating what our brains, make up in the process. Yeah, you can't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think.
So true.
Yeah, and having when you said those things, Bob, it just reminded me of the Savior's instruction to become like a child. And a child is willing to receive. And I think that is maybe uniquely challenging for men, to be in the position of receiving. I notice in moments of my life that I've needed help in like a financial way or even just to help me move something. Even there, I can see those performance procrastination and protective energies come to the surface, like you said, and they're all ego oriented. They're all trying to protect me. And yet the Savior teaches us, so no, become like a child and you can have the greatest of all blessings. And so I think maybe that's what is part of this journey, is that it feels like being a full-grown, responsible, capable man and being like a child don't seem to go together.
Right.
Like, how do those come together, right? I think that's part of the challenge that we face in uncovering and landing on and staying with and being committed to and receiving our identity. Because I noticed for me that I've had definite moments where those don't feel like those are congruent.
Sure.
And so I think the journey of identity is to bring those together. That's part of that journey. And I realize that's thematical, not very specific yet, but I think that's part of the journey, is to realize, no, those need to be together.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love the way you bring those together because I find in my own journey that as I am more surrendered, as I'm more willing to just love and accept who I am instead of trying to fight and claw to accomplish something that, so I can be okay with myself. When I let go of that, it's like, hey, I am okay. And I can love me and Christ loves me, and I can show up as my masculine self, and yet I can still be gentle and kind and receiving. And it's still a journey. It's been a super difficult journey at times, but I do think that is the path, to your point. The journey. I think we're all on it.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating thing to think about. Is it almost sounds like selfishness, but it's actually like the most selfless thing that we can do is to go internal and allow that filter, or install that filter, which I didn't have before, which is, what do I think about this? What do I believe? What do I want to do? What what do I think the best outcome here would be? How do I want to feel? Who do I believe I am? And how do I have my own back in this process? Almost uh, like going back to Dan's point of like safety and trust, like until we know that it's safe, we can't really open up to receive and to trust and to let go in that way, which is really akin to opening up to, what is it that I really believe about me, and what is it that I really want to believe about me, and what is it that I really want to believe about the situation. Because when we're really solid in that and in ourselves and in who we believe we are, who we believe we're becoming, what we think about the situation, and have a really strong sense of that, then our wife can share something with us that's, challenging or beyond challenging. I mean, a little bit of example to just go personal. My wife and I, we had a great weekend last weekend. Then on Monday, we had a really difficult conversation. And sometimes I've been in a good place to receive, and sometimes I have absolutely not been in a good place to receive. And in this instance, I was definitely in a good place to receive because there were so many things that were said that have typically been really triggering for me, like misjudgments of me, of my intentions, of what I meant by this, of what this has to be, when none of that for me was true. But I can honestly tell you, and by the way, this has not always been the case at all, but in that moment, I was able to stand in that place of, that's not really true for me, but I can actually see how that could be very true for you. And so it's almost like I'm not invalidating her in any way, nor am I invalidating me or who I am or who I want to be in this process either. But when we don't have that internal metric of saying, who is it that I am? And what is it that I believe? And what is it that I want from the situation? And how do I want to show up? Then we're just destined to take that whatever anyone says to us as being the thing that we need to do. And so now I have to shift and twist and put myself into a pretzel to accommodate all of this, which doesn't feel very good inside either. Because then it's like, well, I guess I have to give up on myself in order to accommodate her because she seems really upset. And therefore, I don't want to make her more upset. So therefore, I'm just going to kind of give up, give in, and away we go, which then creates resentment. And why does she have to be this way? And she really needs to change. But instead, how can I hold that place of, I love you, and I can totally see why you have that perspective. I even disagree with that perspective, and I love me and support me at this very moment as well. And I know who I am, and I can hold on to this. And I'm even giving myself permission to think about this a little bit longer and to allow it to process a little bit more for me before I even respond. But yet I am open to, hearing what you have to say. And I'm even open to shifting and adjusting, but it's going to go through, it's going to be on my terms, meaning like, I'm going to take in the information you're sharing, and I am going to try to understand it, and then I'm going to make a decision based on what I think is really true and real and relevant for me in this process. You guys, any thoughts on any of that?
Well, what I'm hearing you say is, and I'm kind of tying it to what Dan was saying of to me, it feels like kind of an anchor, and I think other traditions would call it being centered or grounded, just that, hey, this is me, and I'm at one with myself is what's coming to mind, right? If I'm at one with myself, then, and again, I think I've said this before, but I see that in the Savior as they're beating and bruising and spitting and mocking and crucifying. He wasn't defending, he wasn't lashing out, he wasn't, putting anybody down, because he was so grounded in his own identity. And so I think this, honestly, I think it kind of brings it full circle that he knew his identity, and he was totally and completely at peace with who he is, who he was, what his mission and purpose, and the storms will rage and howl, and he was okay with himself. So we're kind of getting toward the end of this episode, but I would just ask each of you, what's one thing you could give to your brothers that might be listening as we wrap this up?
Don't hesitate seeking out help. Yeah, don't hesitate. Help is available. Like just the journey that we've all gone through and are where we are now, and the journey that we're continuing on in. But don't hesitate reaching out and seeking for help and guidance, because little tiny shifts along the way, I don't think it can even be overstated how little tiny shifts can make such a massive difference. Just one little piece of awareness, one little understanding of, oh, I'm holding on to this belief that I really don't want to be holding on to, and here's what that's creating for me. Here's how I'm not showing up. And if just making a little bit of a shift from a place of non-judgment, from a place of kind, considerate, compassion for ourselves, can make just a massive, massive difference. Just like flying an airplane from here to Australia, like a 1 degree difference in the trajectory of that airplane is going to be the difference between whether you actually hit Australia or you're in the middle of the ocean somewhere, right? And just like in our lives, a little shift in our life can make massive difference. So by small and simple things proceedeth that which is great.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I guess I'll kind of piggyback on that, Bob. I think that's such a great comment to reach out for help. I think in addition to that, like one of the paths that has helped me in my journey to know who I am is to notice when I feel like that I feel good. That's a really generic way of saying it too, potentially, but like, when do I feel good? And then to get curious about those moments, because my experience is, if I'm willing to notice when I feel good, when something's filling my bucket, when it's meaningful and fulfilling to me in an activity and in a relationship, in a situation, there's part of my identity being revealed, being expressed, or that wants to be known even. And so I think in those micro moments, as you mentioned, in the small moments of feeling good and building our capacity to do that in our lives by just giving it attention, it can help us on that journey to know who we are by paying attention to when we feel good and then gathering a little bit of data from that and being curious.
Good. Thank you. I think the last thing I'll say is it's actually another quote from Jung, but if I'm not misquoting it, he says, "Where your fear is, there's your path," or "there's your task," I think he says. And so my advice is, whatever you're fearing to do, lean into that. If you're fearing to connect with a brother, or to go actually find somebody to help you on your path, lean into that fear, because where your fear is, there is your task, and that'll take you where you need to go. So thank you both for being here. It's been a lot of fun as always, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Man Talk for Latter-day Saints. Please keep listening and subscribe to be notified of new content. At Man Talk, we are talking about the things that matter and that make a difference in the lives of men. If there's something you want us to talk about, please let us know.